Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate.
Please sing alongside. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tatho jayam udhirayet shunvatam swakatha krishna punya shravana kirtana hridayantasto hi abhadrani vidhunoti suhritsatam nashtaprayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Prantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Today we'll be reading Canto 1, Chapter 17, verse number 16. This is the verse just before two very important verses from Dharma will be spoken upon by Vijay Prabhu tomorrow. 16. Ragnyo hi paramo dharma
Yogi Paramo Dharma.
swadharma sthanupalanam
Swadharma Swarupa.
shasato nyan yatha shastram
Rashidokya.
anapadi excuse me, anapadi utpatan iha
Padevakathanina.
Ragnyo hi paramo dharma
Yogi Paramo Dharma.
swadharma sthanupalanam shasato nyan yatha shastram
Rashidokya.
anapadi utpatan iha Ragnyo hi paramo dharma
Yogi Paramo Dharma.
swadharma sthanupalanam shasato nyan yatha shastram
Shastram.
anapadi utpatan iha Ragnyo hi paramo dharma swadharmo sthanupalanam shasato nyan yatha shastram anapadi utpatan iha. Word to word translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Rajnyaha, of the king or the executive head. He, certainly. Paramaha, supreme. Dharmaha, occupational duty. Swadharmastha, one who is faithful to his prescribed duty. Anupalanam, giving protection always. Shasataha, while ruling. Anyan, others. Yatha, according to. Shastram, rulings of the scriptures. Anapadi, without danger. Utpatan, persons going astray. Iha, as a matter of fact. Translation: the supreme duty of the ruling king is to give all protection to law-abiding persons and to chastise those who stray from the ordinances of the scriptures in ordinary times, when there is no emergency. Purport: in the scriptures, there is mention of apad dharma, or occupational duty, at the times of extraordinary happenings. It is said that sometimes the great sage Vishwamitra had to live on the flesh of dogs in some extraordinary dangerous position. In cases of emergency, one may be allowed to live on the flesh of animals of all description, but that does not mean that there should be regular slaughterhouses to feed the animal eaters, and that this system should be encouraged by the state. No one should try to live on flesh in ordinary times simply for the sake of the palate. If anyone does so, the king or the executive head should punish him for gross enjoyment. There are regular scriptural injunctions for different persons engaged in different occupational duties, and one who follows them is called swadharmastha, or faithful in one's prescribed duties. In the Bhagavad Gita 18:48, it is advised that one should not give up his occupational prescribed duties, even if they are not always flawless. Such swadharma might be violated in cases of emergency, if one is forced by circumstance. circumstances, but they cannot be violated in ordinary times. The state executive head is to see that such swadharma is not changed by the follower, whatever it may be, and he should give all protection to the follower of swadharma. The violator is subject to punishment in terms of the Shastra, and the duty of the king is to see that everyone strictly follows his occupational duty as prescribed in the scriptures. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Thank you very much for joining, dear devotees. When Hari Prasad Prabhu gave his class during Sadhu Sangha, he mentioned one small thing before he started his class. If there's no speaker, you can easily arrange another speaker. But if there is no audience, then nothing can be done. And I thank you all for giving me your attention and your presence here. It's very encouraging for me to speak on the Srimad Bhagavatam. I only hope that the right words come at the right time in the glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. In today's verse, we see something about the emergency situations that allow the king to forego some of the principles of the Shastra. And we see the same even in regular life when there is ruling by the army, or in emergency situations when everything is out of control. There is there is rule by army, not by the executive head of state. And in such situations, not all the laws and rights are available to everybody present. Like, for example, the freedom of speech may sometimes not be upheld to the full degree in such situations, because it could be a very sensitive situation which may be aggravated by someone who exercises their freedom of speech. So in such situations, the very fabric of the constitution might not be upheld to the fullest degree. So in the same way, here Prabhupada is talking about a very dangerous circumstance when Vishwamitra Muni had to subsist on dog meat. It is actually mentioned, there are actually two versions of it. It's hard to ascertain which one is more authentic, because this is words of Prabhupada, and the other is a Sthala Puran, which is specific to a certain temple. So that is not very authoritative. So we will just see what happened. So here what we see is Prabhupada is saying that he lived on the flesh of dogs. It was a one-off circumstance, and he actually got the dog meat from a Chandala, from a Chandala's house. He had to consume dog meat. And this was not a regular circumstance, or he was cursed to do it or so. It was a very difficult famine, and there was no access to food for him and his disciples. So this was a very trying circumstance for him, and he had to subsist on meat, otherwise he would not be able to do his devotional service. So a little backstory on Vishwamitra Muni. He was actually King Kaushika, who used to rule over a large province. And there was sage Vashishta, who was in his same kingdom, who was a very renowned Brahma Rishi. And Vishwamitra Muni visited the ashram of Vashishta. So this is actually very important for the kings to follow. That is, to go to a Brahmana's place for advice. And we even see Mahajanas like Prahlad Maharaj. It is said that he went to the abode of, he went to Rishabha Hills to meet the Avadut Brahman to get some advice. This was the first thing he did after he was coronated as a king. And similarly, there are many other circumstances. Like we see Maharaj Rahuguna. He was actually on his way to Kapila Muni's ashram. And on the way was when Jada Bharat was carrying him. And then he got initiated by Jada Bharat on the way to Kapila Muni's ashram. So these are kings who are showing by example that one must take advice of a Brahmana. And it is also very beautifully situated, because the Brahmana does not have any skin in the game per se. So if you see in today's circumstances, if someone doles out some service to another person, they expect something in return, and that expectation of return kind of contaminates the relationship. But in the case of a brahmana and a king, there is no exchange. If the king wishes to give some donation to the brahmana, he may accept it and he may use it in the service of the Lord. But the brahmana himself lives a very simple life. Previously, Vijay Prabhu gave the example of Chanakya Pandit about how he used to have an oil lamp where the oil was paid for by the government, and he would only use that for his work. If there were guests who came into his ashram, he would use his own light or oil lamp so that where he paid for the oil. So that is the you could say the real pedigree of a good brahmana who would abide by the rules of the scriptures. Now, the thing about Kaushika, who's King Kaushika before he became Vishwamitra Muni, was he was enamored by the Kamadhenu that Vashishta Muni possessed. He was when he visited the ashram, he got very opulent offerings, and he was surprised that someone who's in the Brahmana status had so many opulences to offer, that too to a king, befitting a king. So he wanted Kamadhenu. He had that enjoyership mentality that this should be mine. That is generally how kings would be. If they see some land that they can conquer and rule over, they would like to do that. And that is accepted or acceptable for a king to do. And Vishwamitra Muni wanted Kamadhenu. But Kamadhenu is one of the cows from the heavenly abode. And Kamadhenu would give anything one wishes for. So it's like a wish-fulfilling cow. And we also know about other wish-fulfilling cows like Surabhi and Nandini. And there are many such cows that fulfill anything that anybody would want. And he wanted Vashishta Muni's cow, Kamadhenu. And clearly Vashishta Muni declined. He said, no, Kamadhenu is very important for my sacrifices, and her purity and the milk and everything I get from Kamadhenu is very important. So I cannot give her. But Vishwamitra Muni was not the one who would take no for an answer. He was, after all, the king of that province. So he tried to take Kamadhenu by force. And what happened was, from Kamadhenu's body, there were a few soldiers who spawned and then defeated Vishwamitra's small army who had come there. And he was taken aback because he thought Brahmanas were not people who would fight or even be able to stave off someone of King Kaushik's army. So he did not, he was very perplexed, but he went and got his army again. And this time Vishwamitra Muni again invoked the soldiers, and Vashishta invoked the soldiers, and Vishwamitra was defeated. So he was, and this goes to show that Brahmanas are actually very powerful. Later on, when Vishwamitra Muni could have destroyed the demons himself, he wanted Lord Ram to come. It is not that he could not destroy. He did not want to destroy. So Brahmanas are not weak per se. They're very powerful, actually. They're actually even more powerful than Kshatriyas because they protect dharma, and whoever protects dharma is in turn protected by it. So the Brahmanas are, you could say, invincible per se. So what happened after that is, this is when Vishwamitra Muni started his, you could say, power struggle. He wanted a power trip. He wanted Kamadhenu, and he also wanted the post of Brahma Rishi, not to serve the Supreme Lord, but to get back at Vashishta Muni. He wanted to show Vashishta that he is actually better than him. He felt that this altercation that he had with Vashishta was, you could say, burst of his ego. So he wanted to get back at Vashishta Muni. So Vishwamitra Muni started performing immense austerities. And this was not focused on the Supreme Lord. This was for his own power. So if you see, the Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gives the example of a child. When child is born, the child cries out of inconvenience first. And after the child realizes that every time the child cries, the mother and father are at its beck and call, the child starts to cry for everything. And it knows, oh, I just have to cry and then my servants will come for me. So that is actually innately present in not just children, but in everybody, that there is a small spark that we may need a power trip, or we may need some power. And the intoxication of power is what leads one down the wrong path. And Vishwamitra was going down that path. And the wake-up call was actually from Indra, who sent Ramba to, he sent Menaka to distract Vishwamitra's penance. And then they had a child Shakuntala, and then he realized that he made a mistake, and he again went back to penance. And then Indra sent Rambha next time, and initially Vishwamitra was enamored by her beauty, but then he realized that he's already performed this mistake before, and so he cursed Rambha, and then Rambha went away. And there's a big connecting story, like Ravana misbehaved with Rambha, and then Nalla Kuvera is the husband of Rambha and curses Ravana. And there's many things like that. But goes to show that there are a lot of obstacles that come in his path. He's still not aligned with the Supreme Lord. And then after a lot of penances, Lord Brahma himself gives him the position of Brahma Rishi, and he's satisfied with that position. But only after he meets Lord Ram does he become a pure devotee of the Lord. And there's a very famous song, everybody in a Tamil household would know, Kausalya Supraja Rama Purva Sandhya Pravartate. That was sung by Vishwamitra Muni. When he saw Lord Ram, he could not fathom that Mother Kausalya was so fortunate. Kausalya Supraja Rama Purva Sandhya Pravartate. In the morning, Mother Kausalya has the supreme good fortune of seeing the son of Lord Ram. He's from the Suryavamsh dynasty. He's from the Sun dynasty. Much more brighter than the actual Surya Dev is Lord Ram, and she has the supreme good fortune of waking him up every day. And I only get this during this small interim period when he's come to kill all the demons. So his heart has melted by that time. And what happens after that is, when all the sages, they see Lord Ram, they want to embrace Lord Ram and be with Lord Ram for a long period of time. And that wish was fulfilled in the Krishna avatar when they were born as gopis who had the association of Lord Sri Krishna. So this pastime of Vishwamitra was just a character sketch of him, and how he actually became a pure devotee at the end. And there's one other thing I want to mention from the Sthala Puran. It's actually from the Tiruvananthapuram temple. There it is mentioned that during this time, when the animal was when he was about to eat the dog meat, Indra did not want him to do that. So he disguised himself as a hawk and took away the meat. And Vishwamitra knew that this is Indra, and he told Indra that this is according to dharma, that I'm allowed to eat meat in this extremely difficult circumstance, and you need to give it back to me. And he says, in such a circumstance, and Indra instead gives him a pot of nectar and says, here, you can have this instead. So at that time, Vishwamitra Muni says, how can I subsist on Amrit when everybody around me are suffering from the famine? It is according to dharma that I had to eat meat, and that would not be very, you could say, the best food for my body or for my penances or for my austerities. But everybody around me are suffering. How can I enjoy the nectar of Amrit when everybody else are struggling? He had that compassion towards everybody. And then Indra realized that, okay, so he is actually a very qualified Brahmana, and he realizes that Vishwamitra is not going to budge, and he's going to only eat the meat unless he starts pouring down rains and completes the famine. And then that region in Tiruvananthapuram actually got rain, and it's called Vishwamitra Tirtha. It's a Tirtha Sthan. It's a place where Vishwamitra Muni performed this, this pastime, so to say. And then that region did not get a lot of rain for a long period of time, so it was like drought prone, and there was a famine. And then after this activity, there was a lot of downpour. So that region is very famous in Kerala, in India. So there's also another instance where Agastya Rishi is actually a very short Rishi. He's known among rishis to be short, just in stature, not by qualification though. He's very highly qualified. And he's married to, I don't know if she's an Apsara, but Lopamudra, he's married to her. And Agastya Rishi came to know of two demons whose son also comes in the Krishna Leela. So one of the demon is called Vatapi, and another demon is called Ilvala. They are brothers, Ilvala and Vatapi. So they have this very special potency. So Ilvala's potency is he can change his form into any kind of animal, and that's his you could say special skill or power. And Vatapi's power is he can revive the dead. So they had a very weird interest in eating the bellies of sages. So what they would do is Ilvala would dress himself up as an animal, and then Vatapi would cook him, and then they would camouflage it and offer it to the sages for their honoring. And after they eat Ilvala, Vatapi would revive Ilvala in the stomach of the sage, and then the stomach would burst, and then they would feed on the human flesh of that sage. So this was their day-to-day activities. So Vatapi and Ilvala were such, could say, scoundrels, so to speak. And what happened after that was now they wanted to taste the flesh of Agastya Rishi. So Ilvala became a ram, and then Vatapi cooked him and offered him to sage Agastya, disguised. And Agastya Rishi knew what is happening. He also has heard complaints that they are, disguised, and they've been feeding on many sages. So I must do something about it. And so he consumes the meat. He knows, and he consumes, knowingly he consumes Ilvala. And by his spiritual potency, he digests Ilvala. And there's also a sentence that something like Ilvala Jeernam Bhavatu or something like that. May Ilvala, who has been digested, give me strength. There's a sentence like that in the Puranas. And then what happens is Jeerno Bhavatu. That's what generally when parents offer a lot of food, they'll also pray that may this food also get digested, not just go to your body and get released. And so what happens is at this time, Ilvala is digested and Vatapi is unable to revive him. And Agastya Rishi knows this and he destroys even Vatapi. But Vatapi also has a son. Ilvala has a son called Balvala, who Lord Balram kills later on in his pastimes. So this goes to show that in emergency circumstances, eating meat is not it's not considered against the scriptural injunctions. So we see in this case, we saw the case of Vishwamitra Muni, and then we saw the case of Agastya Rishi, who are the highest class brahmanas of their time. But when there was a call of duty, or when there was a very specific need for it, they were willing to transcend what dharma prescribed. Now, coming back to what Prabhupada is saying, no one should try to live on flesh in ordinary times simply for the sake of the palate. Now, this is very disturbing to hear. I was reading, and there are some folks in the higher echelons of society who, as I think I've mentioned to Jesh Prabhu before, who would take the fetus of a human from the womb of a pregnant mother and cook that tender flesh and eat that flesh. And there's a whole market for this, and people actually, women are willing to have the child in their womb for like 8-9 months, and then the very tender flesh of the fetus is removed surgically, and then people cook it and honor it. So this is just for the palate. And there are also many circumstances when, okay, never mind that. So flesh in ordinary circumstances is, so here we see flesh in ordinary times simply for the sake of the palate. This is actually extremely painful. Like animals themselves, they may be considered a lower species, but it's not that they should be honored. I mean, they should not be eaten as food, let alone human beings. And that too, innocent children. And no one would say anything against these people because they're very powerful, and people may know about it, but they can do nothing about it. So that is the stage that we are in currently. If anyone does so, the king or the executive head should punish him for gross enjoyment, which clearly is not happening because of corruption and the influence of Kali Yuga. There are regular scriptural injunctions for different persons engaged in different occupational duties, and one who follows them is called swadharmastha, or faithful in one's prescribed duties. So in this regard, we see the dharma, the one who has upheld dharma, could say, to the best degree, and that would be Yudhishthir. And I think I've mentioned before, his name is Yudhishthir because even in a trying circumstance such as war, which is also a circumstance of emergency, he's able to maintain his sthira, or his sobriety, or a sober demeanor, even in something as trying as a war circumstance. But one interesting thing about Yudhishthir was he was not as illustrious as his other two brothers. Bhimsen and Arjuna were, you could say, the most feared by the opposite army because they were very strong and very skilled. And you could say Nakul and Sahadev were also very learned and very good looking, which might not work in a war, but they are also very skilled. So the thing about Yudhishthir is everybody knew he was not the best warrior. Everybody knew he was not exactly the best strategist per se. He was not the strongest. He was not the most skilled. He was also not the most learned. Yet everybody were willing to pay homage and respect to him because he was fully aligned with dharma. And we see it was Krishna who spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna in a war circumstance. There are many times, I think, in book distribution you would have heard that people questioning why is it in a battlefield? Is Krishna pro war? Is he promoting war? Why it seems like there's a lot of unnecessary bloodshed? That may be a question that you may have come across. And I think in some book distributor, I think in San Diego, or we were just talking about this. I think Vijay Prabhu maybe. So we were talking about this, and he was telling me what could be a better circumstance or a stage where there is an emergency and one's life could be at stake, and one has lost the mental composure at that point in time, and then gets advice and then acts on that advice immediately. There could be no better stage for this showcase, where a person is really in need of knowledge that is very practical and useful to him immediately, or else his life would be at stake. And that completely transforms him. A 52-minute talk completely transforms him, and then he goes on to win the war. It's like in a game of sport, you're in a losing side, or you are afraid that you don't want to defeat the opposite team, and then you get a pep talk from the coach, and then you go on to win the match. I mean, it's not a great example, but this is what people might be able to relate with. This is exactly what happens, but the stakes are very, very high. And it's not, so here we're talking about different types of dharma, like we're talking about swadharma, but at that point in time, Arjuna knew that there's a hierarchy of dharma. He knew that he had kula dharma, which is familial dharma, to protect his family members. And then he knows that there's a higher dharma, it's a Kshatriya dharma, which is to protect the people who follow dharma. That is what Prabhupada is saying here. The state executive head is to see that Swadharma is not changed by the follower, whatever it may be, and he should be given all protection to the follower of Swadharma. And Arjuna knows that. And he also knows there are other higher levels of dharma, apad dharma, that we speak about in this verse, which is dharma that is to be performed in times of emergency. And then there's the paro dharma, that's the highest one, to be an instrument in the Lord's plan. And Krishna slowly goes from bottom to top in the entire Bhagavad Gita. First, he questions Arjuna. He asks him, if you do not fight, you will not get, if you fight, if you win, you get the kingdom. If you lose, you get the heavenly abode. So you don't lose in any way. So, I mean, even if you lose the war per se, you will be dead, but then you will be in the heavenly abode. So there's nothing to fear. So he is appealing to Arjuna's Kula Dharma. He's appealing to the stage one. And then slowly Krishna unravels everything and comes to the Paro Dharma. That's the Swadharma of the soul. And as we saw, you quoted from the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam about what Paro Dharma is. And Prabhupada is laying a lot of emphasis on how they must be protected among everybody else. Now, yeah, that is the leadership and non-material motivations. Now, there is one thing about, there was one thing that Radheshyam Prabhu was mentioning about slowing down to speed up. In today's world, we see that everything is really fast. I was talking to Jesh Prabhu yesterday about how fast research moves and how technological advancement has made life easier, so to speak, for everybody else. And there was a very interesting thing that Radheshyam Prabhu was discussing, which ties in with today's purport. He was saying that earlier, when bulls were used for plowing, it was a very slow process, and everybody, you would toil hard in the farm, and then they would get a lot of good exercise, and they would be generally very healthy. and then they would have their own crops, and they would offer and honor whatever they grew. And as a result, they had a very self-sustaining ecosystem there. And he said he noticed in the villages close to Pune was that once the tractor was introduced, it would help in plowing the field really quickly. So what would happen is all the farmers would not sweat or toil much, and at the end of the day, they would have a lot of free time, and that they would use it in gossiping, watching movies, talking about politics, and slowly their consciousness dwindled like that. And he was saying that in the technological advancement, we all the algorithms, all the most famous apps, I was reading that a third of the entire internet traffic is just TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. All three of these are vying for our attention, and that's 33% of all the video content that is being played in this world. And all of this is for entertainment, which maybe not always, like when we listen to classes, there are some educational content as well. But a large portion of them is just, you could say, brain rot, as the Gen Z call it, brain rot. And they help rot the brain faster. And what happens is, this means there's a lot of free time that people have. They assume that they have the freedom to make the choice that they want, but the algorithms are so powerful that they take their time without them knowing that they're using it out of their free will. And this is very saddening because these algorithms become better and better. And as the algorithms get better, the attention span of the people reduces. And Radheshyam Prabhu was saying, if it's only because of this speed of advancement that there's a lot of free time, and the people, especially in pastoral areas, waste it in these kind of things. And he was saying, if they were not there, and if the tractor was never brought in, then people would be plowing, and then they may have a slower day, they may have a slower profit and everything, but in the evenings they would come together and speak about Lord Ram. They would speak about Ramayana Katha. They would speak about Mahabharata. He's not telling us to go back. Now, this is stage one. What he also saw was many people who retired early started this movement of permaculture. So permaculture is, according to the definition, it's growing your own food, vegetables, fruits, herbs, using renewable resources, recycling waste, designing living environments in harmony with nature. That is permaculture. And there are many people who are, you could say, who had very stressful jobs or so. They were able to earn enough. And then after all of that earning, they start their own permaculture. They buy a farmhouse, they grow their own crops and do everything. So Radheshyam Prabhu was saying, why did you have to advance materially to go to some notion of innovation and then come back to the same thing and appreciate it even more? So there's a lot of YouTube channels who talk about permaculture, and then they say that plowing the field on your own, growing your own crops, this is so peaceful, calming, and everything. But they're the ones who, at one point of time, wanted the innovation to go on so that they can get food and crops at a faster pace. So Radheshyam Prabhu was drawing the parallel about how the unchecked innovation or the growth or speed needs to be changed, because we need to slow down before we speed up. So he was drawing that parallel. And yeah, one other thing is dharma. The reason I bring this up is dharma is a word, and the root word of dharma is dri, which means innate or to sustain. So dharma is one thing that sustains life. When we see the entire varnashram system, it was instituted to sustain the spiritual culture, not to sustain the material culture. And the varnashram dharma, you could say, is designed to sustain a certain culture. That is why it's called varnashram dharma, not varnashram rules and regulations. It's not like a sadhan per se. It is a dharma because it can sustain. Now, one other thing is living beings are genuinely soft-hearted by nature. They are known to be empathetic towards others and able to connect on a deeper level. And I was remembering there's a statistic that if people were actually see end to end what happens to the food they eat, especially meat, right from the animal being slaughtered to removing the blood, washing it, cleaning the flesh, and then cooking it, they would not be meat eaters. It's only because the government subsidizes all of this and puts it behind a big curtain that nobody cares to question about it. So we see Prabhupada saying here that that does not mean that there should be regular slaughterhouses to feed the animal eaters, and that this system should not be encouraged by the state. But unfortunately, this is exactly what's been encouraged by the state. Okay. Okay, maybe I'll switch to some more interesting topics. Okay, so there's this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is something very interesting. When I'd gone with the youth Sankirtan on Saturday, one person came to the book table and he was asking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I had read about it before, but maybe not to the extent I would have liked. So the Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that there are 5 levels of needs that anybody has, and these needs have to be met in order, the needs of one level have to be met before you can kind of graduate to the next level. And whatever Prabhupada is saying in this purport and the previous few purports, he says that all the needs and requirements of someone following Swadharma need to be protected, and all of their whatever they need should be given to them, so that they don't have to worry about their basic survival needs. So this ties in with what Henry Maslow also observed. The first level is physiological needs, that is for the sustenance of the body itself. So that includes air, water, food, shelter, clothing, sleep. All of these should be taken care of. So there's this notion that pehle bhojan, fir bhajan. When devotees used to go distribute books or prasadam, books to the downtrodden people. So in Mumbai, there's a lot of big slums and also very rich people. So there's a big divide. And when they would go to the poorer areas to distribute books and knowledge and invite them to satsang, they would say, you can keep your philosophy to the side for a minute. We don't even have sufficient food to survive. How will we get this first? And then the Food for Life program and everything started expanding, and they started giving prasadam and then inviting. There are a lot of devotees who have come from humble backgrounds who were struggling to make ends meet, and then they've come from the Food for Life program. So physiological needs need to be met first. So this is the notion of bhojan first and then bhajan later, which does not mean you go into eating as a business. So the second level is safety needs. These are needs that include personal security, no violence, crime or war, health and well-being, general health and well-being, a stable environment, some financial security, and some safety net. So this is level 2, which is the safety needs that one would need. And it does make sense if one has to constantly worry about like losing their job or not having a safe place where they can go for a japa walk or anything like that, where they can be they can get a punch on the face at any point in time, or they can get mugged. Next to UCSD, there was a place where students would fear to go in the evenings because there were a lot of muggings there, and that was unfortunate. So these kind of situations increase fear in everybody, and as a result, one will not be able to follow any of the spiritual dharma because they're always living in a moment of fear, not out of a safety net. The next one is love and belonging, which is not necessarily the highest form of love. So this is friends and family. So this would family, friendship, community, group members, affection, and intimacy with fellow members of the society. So this is to give you could say a feeling of a congregation, as Kaudakarna Prabhu would often tell me or recommend me to attend the Saturday program, because the Saturday program is in the morning, and it's a very you could say a slightly intimate setting where Guru Maharaj talks very freely with the entire congregation members, and it's a more free-flowing conversation, a lot of question and answers. So that comes from the need for love and belonging. The level 4 is esteem, which starts going into a little more deeper and deeper topics. So esteem would be self-respect, confidence, respect from others, reputation, recognition, achievement. These are some of the things that even the 6 loving exchanges between devotees already encompasses. That is, giving compliments to other devotees, encouraging them. All of these come under self-esteem. And the last, the 5th one, is what we call as self-realization, and what Maslow calls as self-actualization, which is creativity, personal growth, moral development, pursuit of meaning, purpose-driven action, and peak experience of real joy, transcendence, and insight. So this is the 5th and the highest level. And this is also the level that we as devotees want to attain. We want to attain and realize what our dharma is, what our goal is, what our role in this entire material world is. And when we realize that, as what Prabhupada says, that is our self-realization. That's what the entire SSR book is about realizing who we are and what our purpose is on this earth. That would be actualizing ourselves, or realizing who we are, or realizing ourself, so to speak. So while this may be, and this is very highly cited, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is very highly cited, and everybody does subscribe to it. So it will be a way for everybody to understand how to get to the highest level. Only if the first 4 levels are met to some degree at least, will somebody be able to be in a position to look deeper into what the 5th need is. And that is exactly what Prabhupada is saying. And that is what all the kings also need to institute. When Prithu Maharaj was enthroned, the first thing he did was he wanted Varnashram Dharma to be established, so that all of these first 4 needs of everybody are met. Self-esteem, love, belonging, safety needs, and physiological needs, all of them are met, so that everybody in that stage can strive for the highest, that is self-actualization. And about punishing. There's one interesting thing about Sudama that I wanted to talk about before I close, and that is when Sudama had none of these needs met. He was a poor Brahmana whose physiological needs were not met. He did not even have. Actually, even the rats in his house were dead because there was no food for the rats to eat. So he was that poor. And even the chipped rice that he took to Krishna was borrowed from the neighbors. And that was the only thing that was left in their house. He was that poor a Brahmana. His physiological needs itself were not met. But he was brave enough, or he was, although his wife was the one who prodded him to go to Krishna and ask him for some wealth to sustain, because he was the king after all, he went there, but he hesitated to ask Krishna for wealth. And Krishna himself knew that he needs wealth, and I'll take care of it. And he took the chipped rice from him. But there's one very interesting thing that Sudama thinks about when he leaves Krishna's palace. He thinks, or he knows that Krishna knows he needs some wealth. And Krishna could have given him some wealth when he was leaving the palace, but Krishna chose not to give him. So Sudama could have been bitter in that situation. None of my Maslow's hierarchy of needs are met. I mean, obviously, he's not going to think about Maslow at that time, but just to say, even his physiological needs are not met. What to speak of love, belonging, and other pursuits? Krishna knows this. Yet he did not give me any money. There must be a reason behind it. I went to the Supreme Lord and asked, and he did not give me. And in that situation, what he thought is actually it's a little deep. And Sudama thinks, maybe if Krishna had given me some wealth, I might have been corrupted by it. And that's why Krishna did not give it to me. And just because of that thought, when he had that thought, was when Krishna changed his house into a palace and gave him all the wealth that he would ever need, or for multiple lifetimes. And he did not know it at that time. Because of that thought that Krishna can never do anything wrong, and he fully depended on Krishna. And if Krishna did not give him even a gold coin in return for anything that he had done, he was willing to think that Krishna thought I might get corrupted if he gives me wealth. So it's good that he did not give me any wealth. And that's when Krishna knew, yes, he deserves it now. And Krishna gave him the entire palace. And when he went back, he didn't know if this was his house or not. He was looking for his shack, but he couldn't find it. And this goes to show that one can actually transcend Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You do not need any of the other 4 steps. You do not even need the first step. There's also the story of the golden mongoose, where there's a very poor brahmana, and the get and he has only enough, and he has 3 children and a wife, and he only has enough food for 1 person, and then they divide it among themselves, and then a brahmana comes, and then he gives his part to the brahmana, and then so no, they give 1 part to the brahmana, and he distributes his part among his family members. Then a vaishya comes, and then he distributes so and so, and at the end uh, all of his family members die because they don't have enough food because of all the guests who came. Even Lord Indra comes as a dog, and he offers the last morsel of rice, which could have protected his children and his wife, but he chose to give it to the guest because he had heard that Atiti Devo Bhava is something that the Shastras enjoin, and he wanted to follow it to the highest. And then there was a mongoose that was passing by and saw this entire pastime. And then once they passed away, the mongoose just rolled on the foot dust of all of these members of the family for the amount of sacrificing nature they have. And then 1/2 of the mongoose became golden. And then when Yudhishthir Maharaj was performing the Rajasuya sacrifice, this mongoose comes there, and Narad Muni tells Yudhishthir, you see, the only 1/2 of the mongoose is golden. The other half is not yet golden because it's still waiting for someone who is able to sacrifice to the level of that family who did not have sufficient for themselves, but were still willing to give to the others. Until the mongoose comes across a person of that charitable nature, it will only be half golden. And he tells it as a reminder to Yudhishthir. So at that point, Yudhishthir was hoping that he had given enough in donation and charity. At that time, Narad Muni invokes the mongoose and tells Yudhishthir that there is no end to the amount of charity one can do. There's always more and more charity that one might be able to do. And he wanted Yudhishthir to realize that. And that is exactly what a king must embody, that there is no end to the amount of spiritual progress or charity or anything that he can do for the brahmanas. And okay, maybe we are way over time, so I would like to stop here. I understand there are a lot of corrections that I need to make. If you would please share how I can improve, that would be amazing. Thank you, David. Hare Krishna.
Wonderful class. Not a moment to hold.
Thank you for
Following your application, man.
stop. Srimad Bhagavatam ki
पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की
जय।
प्रभुपाद की श्री विजय प्रभु की